Welcome to Keep the Hotel Empty. Today we've kept the hotel empty for a gentleman who specializes in helping people reach their full potential, be it through speaking, teaching, coaching, or with his new business, Elm North, Mr. Kyle Elmendorf. Kyle, welcome.
Thanks, Eric. Pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm stoked for you to come. I know we've been trying to get you in for a minute. I feel like I've been saying that to all the guests lately, but everything is coming full circle. So I'm very grateful that the stars have aligned and you're here.
Yeah. I'm excited about the conversation. Love what you're doing here with the platform.
Yeah, likewise. And I think that we share some very much common ground here.
Yeah.
So I know that you've got this new business going, but I want to press rewind back to something you may be surprised for me to ask. I did a little bit of homework, and I heard you describe a pivotal time when you got drugged to football practice, kicking and screaming, crying, and that was a time when things changed for you around 6th grade.
It's funny you asked that because I literally was telling my youngest son that story this weekend, trying to get him to go out for lacrosse or give it a shot.
Nice.
It's like, I was in 6th grade, and it was coming off of I was a soccer player growing up, and family had been involved in football and all of that, and was done with soccer, didn't want to do it anymore. And my parents were like, well, you're not just going to sit at home and do nothing. So they're like, give football a shot. I was like, no, I don't want to play football, no business with it. I don't know what it was afraid to get hurt or something. So literally was crying before the first day. And my mom took me up there, made me give it a shot, fell in love with it after 2 practices. And then, that was the rest was history for me, is with the sport, and played all throughout high school. And then, in my career for a long time, I've been a football coach. And now this past year was helping coach my son's football team. So it's kind of where things started for me with sports, but was getting drugged to practice crying because I didn't want to go.
What do you think were some of those things that clicked for you right away, even when you were that young, where you couldn't really put your finger square on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it probably had something to do with being out there with a group of people. And I think that's always led me to what I'm doing now in my career. But working with a group and having a sense of camaraderie, things clicked pretty quickly with that. And I was really fortunate to have a coach. I think that was probably the other thing. It was a man by the name of Jim Ernst. And he made it fun for you to be there. And it wasn't, something where you were forced to do anything or it was all about winning. But he made it fun. He made it a point to really talk to kids and build a relationship with them. And in a way where you wanted to be there, and if you weren't there, you felt you were missing out. So I think that's kind of what hooked me in it. And then I liked hard work. I liked working at practice and then going to there and pushing myself, challenging myself. And he was kind of the guy that brought it to life for me.
Well, where do you think that comes from? That's an uncommon trait for 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds.
Yeah, working hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that in them, whether it's sports or, with music, I'm sure with you, is there's a lot of reps, a lot of practice that has to go into developing a skill or a craft. And that's all the unseen hours. That's all the stuff, away from people.
Right.
I think it comes from the affirmation you get from it. You see yourself improve, but then you also see people there that are supporting you, like a coach, for example, that is constantly building you up. And when you're doing something right, that they're praising you for it. And, I think you want to continue to kind of work towards those things.
So when you first started, did you start to have success in sports right away, or the success was just the enjoyment?
A little bit of both. I came from a family where sports was kind of in the family DNA. Everyone played. My dad had 3 brothers, so those 4 guys, they all grew up playing. My uncle ended up being, he got a job later on. He ended up being my high school football coach.
Nice.
My dad coached me in basketball when I was playing growing up. So it was always in the background, and by that was kind of more inclined athletically or naturally to do it. But I think just that experience-wise, because I didn't have that in baseball. I didn't have that in soccer. So the coaching made a difference on how it was presented and the experience you had in it.
So that was something you noticed instantly too, the profound impact of having someone that you felt more mentored by?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Just like the genuine connection that's there, but then like you see how you can develop when someone goes about it the right way. And then we had success. I mean, that was part of it, is like we had a good group of people. We had success at the younger level, and then we were pretty good at the high school level. And, and that kind of led me to the path where that's where I started my career, is wanting to be a part of that, because I saw what it did for me and like my confidence and just like the enjoyment I had. So I wanted to be able to provide that for other people.
So what were some of the first like big fundamental lessons you took away maybe from that 13-year period, 13-year-old period to going through high school, where it becomes a little more serious and, you're taking on more life skill sets than just, the camaraderie and knocking heads with the boys?
Yeah. One of I remember it because it's like ingrained in our memory now, but like every day we would have a practice schedule that we would look at for football. And like the motto or the mantra was prepare to win, expect to win. And that was like became part of our individual, but like the collective identity. Like we showed up, and every year it was on the shirts, prepare to win, expect to win, work hard.
Love that.
Right. And like we were challenged, but like when we got challenged, it became part of the group where we all wanted to just lean into it. Like we loved competing. And then we saw what that can do for like the team success. So for me personally, that was like evidence that you need at a young age. And then as you get older, you start to look at that and you apply that through all the lenses. It's not just sports, but that same thing applies to whatever career, whatever passion you're going to be in. Like you got to work hard, but the preparation is there. And then, with that, your confidence comes from doing that.
Right.
And I think those stack up over time.
That's very interesting, and I want to mission drift just a little bit here, because you mentioned a mentality of expecting to win. And there's part of me that feels like that's sort of a frowned upon thing now. How do you walk the line, either personally or with people that you're helping, where you can have those expectations where you want to win, versus the expectations of we can be satisfied as long as we're confident our best effort went into this?
Yeah, for me, it's a blend of both. John Wooden was like probably like the most influential person for me as a coach. Like that's who I would say I modeled my coaching philosophy off of during that time. And so I think it's a blend of that. I've coached teams that were really good, and we won a lot of games, and I've coached teams that were below 500, and I had to learn how to manage that from like the personal expectation level, and realizing that you might do your best work as a coach with a team that's below 500 rather than a team that's super talented. Because if you can get them to like their ceiling to achieve at their highest level, then to me that's winning. So that's the hard part about if you're in sports. The scoreboard's not subjective.
Right, exactly.
But when I think of like sports on the bigger scale and everything that I do in that space, it's the very, very few individuals are going to make it to play professional sports. And of that, their career span's so limited. So if we're not giving them tools to be successful in sport and then both in life, then I think we're failing them. So I think that's kind of where that belief becomes married with the working hard, expecting to win, is like winning might look different for one group or another, but more often than not, like if you have two teams that are relatively equal or two cultures that are the culture is a separator. It's the people that make the team, and it's your relationships, it's the vision, it's the belief, and it's the character of those individuals that help them rise above. So that became my passion through coaching, was realizing that I wasn't at a high school where we had Division I athletes running up and down the halls. We didn't have like Kirby Smart or any of these guys coming to our school to recruit kids.
Right.
So you start to wrestle with the question, again, of why am I in this? What's the purpose behind what I'm doing? And for me, it really early on started gravitating towards like character and leadership. And then that became like my main goal and focus in coaching was developing those traits and having that be like the core of what we were doing through sport. And like the sport was like the vehicle that we used to teach those skills. And it was like one of the things I always say is like, I've got 2 boys and I've got a garage full of basketballs, footballs, baseball, whatever. And people will say, well, sports teach life and they teach character. Mm-hmm. Well, I can go out in my garage and pull up a football and a basketball, but that football, basketball is not going to teach me anything.
True.
It's the coach. It's the person behind it that either they teach those skills and they teach those lessons or they don't. And so that's something that I've always taken very seriously. And like that became my passion of everything that I do is that lens of character and leadership development.
Well, that kind of lends itself to the you can never stop learning portion of the show. How do you manage keeping that mentality for yourself and then trying to help others have that mentality? Because that seems to be a big cotter pin of your ethos.
Yeah, I think, if you want to have buy-in and if you're going to be coaching or leading other people, then you've got to like walk the walk, so to speak. So I think also when you share, like for me, what I'll do is I like to read a lot, like to listen to podcasts a lot.
There we go.
And definitely going to be listening to a few of the episodes that you mentioned earlier. But I'm like you, naturally curious, but I don't ever want to stop learning or growing. And I feel like when you do that, then my wife and I kid about this all the time, but my goal personally is to live to be 100. And so if I'm going to do that, then I'm never going to stop like being active or learning or seeing what's out there. Or, one of the things that's great about working with young people is like they can teach me things and they can help me stay up on track of what's going on out there or
yes, sir.
New trends. And like, I don't feel like I'm like lost in what's going on. So, and then when you have those conversations with people, I think that's the great connector. And so for me, that's where I get a lot, like I'm an introvert by nature, but I get a lot of energy by connecting and having conversations with people and sharing what I've learned, or more importantly, just like listening and learning from other people. But I think that's, to be successful in anything, I think you got to have a growth mindset. Things change too quickly for you not to have one.
Very true. It seems to be that that's a trick in and of itself, though, for a lot of people. What are some of the things that you think help maintain a growth mindset? Like some of the gold stars you get. How do you know you're growth mindsetting this right?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me personally, I think Salil Bloom said it best. And sometimes I think a long time ago, maybe like I got caught up in like the trend of like, well, I read 52 books a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And he had a quote or a saying, and he's pretty popular like on Twitter, and I think he's well known on LinkedIn. But one of the things he put out is it's better to read a book that really moves you once every year, or keep repeating that, rather than like superficially fly through stuff. So I think for me, like, how do you know that it's actually working or it's a growth mindset is things that challenge maybe perceptions that you've already had, or show you where you have a lot of area for improvement. And,
can you think of an example of that you've had?
Like just where there's a lot of growth?
Yeah, like where you've said, okay, I am growing through this. This is the growth mindset in action.
Sales.
Yeah?
Sales. Because my background was in education. So high school social studies teacher, coach, all of that. And then helped came on board with the company, helped grow it. And I never had a background in sales. I never took a marketing class, never took a sales class or anything like that. And so when you're going out there and obviously trying to get clients or, trying to build a book of business or anything like that, you've got to learn. And, that's the growth mindset is firsthand, 1,000 no's and growing through that. But no one taught me that. That was something I had to go out and learn on my own. And I think that's one of the things I try to convey to students or to young athletes or young professionals that I work with is like the best learning you're ever going to do is on your own. It's not going to come from anyone else telling you what to do, but it's trial and error. And I think for a lot of that, it's the willingness to, I hate to say it's like to be uncomfortable because everybody says it, but like
Right.
it was really challenging, and it still is. It's still a process where I'm trying to evolve and get better and better at it and learn, different tactics or strategies or what make great salespeople great. That's something that I've had to definitely grow through the past 7-8 years.
Well, it's funny you should say that, and we're gonna double mission drift. We've had the pleasure of having on some entrepreneurs and some salespeople, and Seth is an amazing salesperson himself. I'm curious what you found makes for good salespeople, irrespective of the fact that they're salespeople. Thank you for sticking with us. We hope you're enjoying the episode. We'd like to take this time to talk to our sponsor for this week, Tony Barrett from Barrett Realty.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate you having us on the show. Barrett Realty has been in business for 20 years, and we are a boutique real estate company. And I look forward to servicing our community with people that want to buy and sell property. I think it's very important that we're out there advocating for personal property rights. And we want to be the people that you select when it comes to buying and selling homes. So please, if you're interested in buying or selling homes in Manatee, Sarasota, or surrounding counties, reach out to us at Barrett Realty at 941-745-9999 or brmovesyou.com.
Again, we'd like to send a big thanks out to Tony Barrett, Barrett Realty, for sponsoring this episode and being an awesome part of this community. Please enjoy the rest.
Learning from some of the best ones that I know, and what seems to be a common theme from other people who are really successful, is to ask questions, shut up and listen, and figure out what do they need, what's a pain point, and really listen to what they're saying rather than trying to interject things and then going back and talking about how what you can do or what you can provide can actually help them, and not just come at them and say, hey, I got this, this, and this, and that, but to be more conversational and to listen more than you talk.
So it's more the delicacy of conversation skill than it is necessarily the operative knowledge of the product.
Yeah, and I think I always had it misconstrued, and maybe I'm wrong. So
Hey, we're talking opinions. You're allowed.
Yeah, but my perception was much different of that. It was always like suit and tie, like pushy, like spreadsheets, and stuff like that. And like everyone that I've talked to, and even hearing other people on different podcasts, just talking about like the relational nature of that client relation, what's going on there. And once you have that and build that, then, it's all about the connections you have. So that's been a common theme that I've took from a lot of people is making sure that you have a connection, that you listen and you're trying to solve what their problem or what their pain point is, not push a product on them or push a service on them.
Interesting. You had mentioned kind of two diametrically opposed things, but I think we may be on the same page to how they coexist. So I'm interested in what your thought is on this. You said that most of your lessons you can learn by yourself. You can fall down and pick yourself up. These are valuable ways to learn. But you had also mentioned that having mentors and having coaches is hugely beneficial too. I believe those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I'm curious as to how you help people who are you're coaching or you're trying to bring up navigate between those two when, hey, you got to trust your gut or fall on your face and learn, or hey, just trust me on this one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question and great point. I think for the learning part is like people having to take responsibility for their own life and their actions of like not being always given something and just being naturally curious. Like go out, like we live in an age where everything is available to us. We can go out and learn that. I think
good or bad.
Yeah, good or bad for sure. The mentorship comes in when you find something that you want to do and you're passionate about, and that's the power of the mentorship is they can expedite the process where they can help you avoid some of those pitfalls. So for me, when I look at it like, your best learning is the learning that you do on your own. That's kind of, striking that curiosity and going down that road of like, this is something I'm really interested in. Here's what's been done before. You can read everything, listen to it. But I think the mentorship is like the guide, the person that comes along next to you that really helps you see things from maybe a different perspective. But I think everyone needs someone that can encourage them as well. Like, it's difficult if you're going to go at it alone.
Right.
And to have success in any industry, you're going to need a team of people. And whether that's a coach or the teammates, the people that you work with, that's the power of mentorship is having the encouragement, but being able to learn from other people's experiences.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful right there. So talk to me a little bit. We're going to rewind now. Talk to me a little bit about when you're coming out of school and you're going to start coaching. How do you transition from playing in your athletic career into now you becoming the mentor? What was the road like that made of?
Yeah, I mean, it's a definite learning curve because coaching is an art, whether it's in sports or whether it's working with people in like the professional business world. It's learning how to get people to sometimes do what they don't want to do, but how to really call them up to like a higher level. A lot of it could be vision casting in sports or work what you say with one individual works for them, but then learning how to shift that message in a different way to meet someone else. So coming out of it from an athlete perspective, you don't know any of that. And a lot of what you're doing early on, you're just kind of mimicking what you experienced when you were playing.
Right.
And then I think that's where the growth part comes in, is going to conferences or clinics, learning from other people on what's worked for them, how do they deliver a message, how do they create a culture, how do they lead people and cast that vision. So that's the art part of it that you have to go through early on. And I think when I look back at myself, I think a lot of people come out and you think you know everything and you have all the answers.
Of course. And why not?
You get humbled pretty quickly.
Yeah, right.
And you learn that, it does take a little bit of pain and failure to give you perspective on how to deal with things and how to relate to people, because it can't just all be a one-size-fits-all model or message that you're given.
Right. Well, what do you think are some of the tricks to quote-unquote failing forward?
Yeah, I think the first thing is like you have to realize and be willing to sit back and like watch it. So if it's in sports, you got to be able to watch the film. You got to be able to correct it or things like that. Nowadays, when you look at it through the business lens, it's having the ability to sit back and dissect things. And did this work or did it not work? What did I do that was maybe off? How could I improve upon that? And, I think it's learning that I think for most people, and what I try to relate and have learned myself, is everybody's failed.
Of course.
And I think like the springboard can be for the message to younger people is the more you fail, the more likely you are to succeed. But people too often will let that failure define them. And so that's where I'll use like a little bit of like psychology and stuff like that of like the social studies nerd in me coming out is we all have stories in our mind that we tell ourselves. And we go back to like our ancient ancestors. I use this all the time with the kids, but like when they encountered a threat, what's the mechanism that fired in their brain? If they stepped out of the cave and they saw like a saber-toothed cat or they felt like they were endangered, what's that mechanism? And they all know, we'll say fight or flight.
Right.
Right. And the brain's job is to keep us alive. And a lot of that for most of us becomes like that painful memory. The brain will say, oh, Kyle, you don't want to go talk to that girl. The last one rejected you. You don't want to put yourself out there like that. Or you made a sales call and you got rejected. Like you don't want to pick up the phone and do that again. Or that person ghosted you after you thought you closed the deal and that really sucked. It was painful. And like it can be easy to sit there and use that as an excuse of like, well, I tried it and I failed.
Crisis of faith moments.
Right. And I think like once you're able to get past that and to have a success after a failure, then you're able to encounter the next one. And that's where the confidence comes in. Like people can say, "Oh, be confident." Well, that you can't just be confident. It's got to come from something that you have done. And I think that's the job where the coaching and the mentorship comes in, is like, we're not naturally good at celebrating ourselves, especially young people today are kind of conditioned not to, because it's being seen as like arrogant or boastful. And they need to be proud. I think people need to be proud. They need to feel that sense of pride in themselves. And then that's where the coach can come in and say, "Hey, look what you just did. Like, you might not realize it, but look at the improvement that you had. Right? Look at the percentage that you've increased year over year. Look at your growth that you've had." And that's, I think, the power of coaching and mentorship is giving someone that confidence, whereas more than likely than not, left to our own selves, we're going to beat ourselves up and rely on that failure.
Yeah, it does seem to be a default setting for a lot of people. You mentioned, having some responsibility and being able to take some honest inventory of yourself. I think that personally, I feel that's a great way to build confidence. But a lot of people really have aversion to having objective conversation with themselves. The accountability mirror, as David Goggins calls it. How do you get people to be able to say to themselves things along the nature of, yeah, maybe I performed really poorly, but I can watch the film and learn X, Y, and Z and perform much less poorly next time. Instead of saying, I performed really poorly, I'm just going to perform poorly in perpetuity here.
Right. Yeah. I whether, again, it's in coaching or if it's just in life, in the professional nature of it, I think the first thing is always got to be, you have to model that, as the leader yourself. Like, you have to model that to people and show your areas like where you might have struggled, or be open about that and share those stories of like, I remember, I went through something similar and here's what helped me. I think before you get to that, you always have to have moments. I think it's important early on to catch people doing things that are right and to celebrate the wins early on, celebrate the success, because people, again, we're not naturally inclined to receive criticism because we can be defensive. I know I can, but I'm more willing to receive or hear that from someone that I feel has my best interest in mind, where it's not, that's the only thing I hear from them. So if like in the sports setting, if you were going to be breaking down film of someone and showing like things that they've made a mistake on and this wasn't their best game, you also want to be able to, supplement that and show a few clips where they've done the right thing before. And then the next time, whether or not they got it 100% right, just celebrate the success and the improvement that they've had. So it's got to start for me with that, is shout praise, whisper criticism, having that rapport to where that they feel trusted, they feel confident, and they feel like you really have their best interests in mind.
So in the old carrot or stick adage, it's carrot most of the time.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And again, when it's carrot most of the time, the stick means a little bit more when it happens. Because if it's someone where the negative coaching or the constant criticism is, sooner or later, that's going to go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, well, and I don't mean to interrupt. I don't necessarily mean the constant criticism. I think the operative portion of this for people is the objective criticism. Right. Yeah, where it isn't, where the truth stings. Even if I don't have 10 things to tell you were horrible at, I had one thing to tell you were horrible at, and it was true. How do you mitigate that?
Yeah, I think, again, that's where you have to, the culture is important for the team, no matter, again, in sports or business. So the accountability has to come through, okay, we have a vision of what we want to be and who we are. And once we've established that, then we've agreed that that's something that we're working towards and that we aspire to be that or to have that. So when you then have those difficult conversations, it's not necessarily in relation to the person. We start talking about maybe the action or what was done that was an error and how that can be improved. Now, it's not like a default of Kyle or Eric. It's not a personal defect, but it's more of the action rather than the person. So I think some people struggle differentiating between the two.
Yep, and that was actually going to be my next question. I just want to jump right to it. How do you help those people who get stuck taking things personally and that impedes growth?
It's tough. I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think there's one like right answer to that, but that again comes, I think, back to the consistency of what you're doing, whether it's on a one-to-one basis or with everybody on the team. But if you're consistent as a leader in your approach, what you're establishing as the success and the vision that we're going to have, then again, I think if it's consistent, they keep falling short in those areas. One of the things that can happen over time is like you might change up the way that the message is delivered. The frequency of giving that message could change, and then the tone could change over time. The first time we're having a conversation and we're bringing something up, not going to really come in there heavy-handed and go real hard truth on someone. But if it's the fifth or sixth time that it's been having the conversation, and then I think that's a time where you have to be firm in what that is. And that message then you can have, and it's like, well, we've talked about it the past 3 months, been brought up, and haven't seen any improvement, haven't seen any change here, wondering what's going on. But like, these are the expectations, like this needs to be followed. And I think, that's kind of the approach that helps in a way. And sooner or later, at some point for us all, you've got to be able to respond to that. And then sometimes you either remove yourself from the situation if it's not good for you, or then it becomes clear that that fit on the team might not be the best for that person. But you've got to have a vision of what that actually looks like. It can't be something that's on a case-by-case basis and, you're making it up as you go. You've got to have some structure, and all of that's got to be in place to be able to help you carry those out.
What do you think the reason for that is? That you have to maintain some type of rigidity to your goal along the way if you think you're going to meet it?
Well, I think there's got to be standards in place. I think that's like the rigidity of it is
okay.
What are the standards that we agree to that we want to be known for? What are the standards of how we operate? And when you look at, any successful team or organization, they're going to have procedures in place. Now, I'm not talking about like a manual book and everything's got to be checked on that box, but like I think it goes back to like the personal character. Mm-hmm. Like this is who we are and this is what we do. So that's a lot of times, our character is how we show up on a day-to-day basis and the job that we do consistently. And then when we build the leadership in other people, that's getting them to help other people raise their performance. So it's not one of those things like getting back to like the standards. You can't just have something that is talked about periodically or once a year and say, hey, this is our goal, this is what we want to do, but then you never talk about it again. So I think that's where everyone's got to have alignment on what this looks like and what it looks like for me to live that out.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sure you've encountered this. When you have all of this laid out well in the onset, you've got your goals, you've got, character identities that you want to make sure, for want of a better way, are rigidly held to. Invariably, somewhere along the line, someone's going to either mission drift or have a hard time buying in. What are some of the leadership skills you have or you've helped others have that have helped the people that weren't buying in, the weak link in your chain, the short spoke in your wheel? What do you do when that happens and you've got everything going right?
It's kind of, the bus is in motion, everything looks good, and someone, doesn't feel a part of that.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's early on that's important, like for anybody in leadership or in any setting, is again it goes back to like the connections and the relationships, and more so understanding what makes people tick away from work. I think one of the great things that you can do in any setting to help people just feel valued before you get to like the ins and outs of the jobs is I think people, they want to feel a part of something bigger than themselves.
Excellent point.
No matter what it is that they're involved with. And that can't happen unless you know someone personally. So one of the things that I like to share with people is like be more interested than interesting. So ask questions. Like you were sharing before we recorded, like be curious.
Yeah, it's fun.
And like
it's great fun.
But people will share things on their heart. And like when you really just sit back and listen, they're going to tell you what's important to them or where they spend their time. And when you start to do that enough, then what you're able to do is connect them to other people.
Right.
With like-minded interests or passions or things like that. But when you're building a team, you can't just say everyone's valued and everyone's important here and then not do anything to show that. So you have to take the time to like develop a personal connection or a relationship with them. And once they give you something like, oh, I got 2 kids and we love to go fishing on the weekends. Yeah, we're going this weekend. Okay. Make it a point to ask about that. Like, how did it go? Did you guys catch anything or things like that? I think those little like follow-ups go a long way. Once people start to feel like they're valued and they're not just like the 12th man on the team or they're just a number, an employee number that works here, that actually, oh, someone took the time to talk to me. And then they will I think people naturally will start to want to be a part of that. They feel like a sense of almost like a reciprocity.
Right.
Of like, okay, well, that person was kind to me. I want to be kind to them. I think that's a part of all of our nature.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to ask. Do you think that sort of thing has more gravity now because of the seemingly disingenuous nature of so many interactions? Or do you think this is just a pre-programmed part of our ape brain that we're still doing now?
Yeah, I mean, at its core, one of my beliefs is like we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
If we just take the time to sit down and talk to each other and just have, like, the great thing about your podcast is you're having a platform where people can just talk and there's no judgment, but you and I are going on different parts of it. You're asking great questions and it's challenging me to think on how you would answer that or what you do. And so when you get to the core of the human nature. Again, I feel like people want to belong and they want to be a part of it. So our goal then as a leader is to make that happen. And one of the best stories that I've heard about that, I don't know the name of the individual, is an airline executive. And their study or the question was pretty much posed to him in the interview is, how did you turn this culture around? And he shared that it was just like, asking one more question every interaction that he had, and then listening just a little bit longer and letting people talk. And what he noticed as a result of that is when he would start having conversations with people, their eyes were more engaged. There was more life and there was more uptick in their voice and they were genuinely more excited. So, what we see out there in the world today, I think a lot of people, they're looking for jobs where they can it's not all about money for people. They want to feel safe, secure, but they want to feel valued. And that's the job of the leader is if you're going to get the team going in the right direction, everyone's got to feel that. So for me, it all starts with connection and relationship.
Do you think that shift is something new?
The need's always been there, but I think like people are starting to realize how important it is from the younger generations that are in the workplace. Because one of the things that they're saying is most important to them in the job market is having the emotional safety and security of being in a workplace, like feeling like they can be there, they can do their job, and that they're valued. That's one of the highest priorities when it comes to seeking out a job. So I think now top level executives and people are starting to realize the importance of that. For a long time, I think it was seen as like foo-foo, kumbaya, like this isn't moving the metrics or the bottom line, but like that's the separator. And when you look at like employee retention and engagement is a huge thing for people today. It starts with the culture. It's got to be something where it's not something that can be stagnant. You've got to keep driving that forward.
Yeah, well, you meant that's interesting. Employee retention is one of those things. Now, this isn't a subject I thought we'd get to, but hey, employee retention is one of those things. Now, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. We had a lot of people who worked for us their entire lifetimes, right? Now it seems like my kids, their generation, the only way they can get a raise, the only way they can do anything is to leave a job. Staying at a job is like now this whole foreign concept. So where's the line between creating an environment that will foster some employee retention and you can keep good people and cultivate them even further, and where you're just in this turn and burn thing, everybody's leaving, you can't make someone feel valued, they'll be gone in a year?
That's a great question. I think one of the things, as you were saying, that was running through my mind is that you have to be okay if someone leaves and it's better for them. Then I think you've done your job.
Mm.
So if you've trained someone so well and they've developed, and you might not be able to pay them now at a certain degree. Now, certainly there's a fine line between, because a lot of people will say, well, there's an entitlement issue.
You're right.
Which is probably present to some degree. But I think also, like, if someone genuinely has a better opportunity that's on the table for them, like being happy for them and knowing that you played a part of their success. And then, I think that's where then the reputation of the company comes in, to where, hey, we're a place that we hire great young talent and we're able to be a springboard. Now, it's not always going to be that case, but I think, like, if I'm looking at it through that lens, just like my personal take is, like, I want to create something that people want to be a part of. But if I'm not able to pay them and they're able to go out and get more for the value that they're bringing in, then, hey, I'm happy for you. I played a role in that. We're happy you were here. And, I think then I'm a big, like, law of attraction guy. So I'm a big believer in, like, do good comes back to you. So if you're helping people succeed, then you're going to have a positive reputation, and your connections and your network are going to help you fill whatever void that might be.
Right. Well, and I guess that's one of the pivotal roles of leadership. So if you could maybe draw me some of the parallels you saw from going in the sports world to going into the business world, where you're essentially doing the analogous thing of developing talent. Mm-hmm. Because that's kind of what I'm curious about, the overarching things you see as some of the keys to developing talent.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be consistent. That's the first thing is when you're looking at it from the athletic space, or if you're looking at it in the professional space, is when you're developing talent, it can't just be like a sporadic type of thing. It's got to be intentional. So there's got to be a plan in place. Right. In athletics, that's easy because, you've got anything you can YouTube. There's thousands of Instagram accounts now. People can look up whatever and they can model that.
And in the end, the goal is cut and dry. We got to win a game.
Right. The scoreboard doesn't lie.
Right.
But I think when you translate that to the business world, then it becomes, again, back to, like, the improvement model of, like, continuing to grow and not just going through the motions of just, like, we're punching a clock, we're rinse and repeat, but challenging people to be their best and wanting to grow and supporting that and cultivating that. So for the leadership side of that, it starts with you. So it starts, again, I think what we're really focusing on now, the past couple of trainings that I've worked with in some of these professional groups, is starting with, like, the self-awareness and the self-management piece. Because a lot of the times we're so goal-oriented that we'll use the analogy in our training sometimes, like the root versus the fruit. And everyone's caught up in, like, the fruit, the success, what we're earning quarterly or the year. Right. And we want to have that. We have to have that. But if you ignore the root, again, the people part of it, what really drive the organization, the fruit's not going to be there. So in order to really reach those people, again, I myself have to take care of myself. I have to know what makes me show up at a high level. I have to know the type of rest I need, what type of diet might be best for me, what energizes me, what fuels me.
Right.
And then I have to have systems in place that help me manage that, to keep that consistent. Once I'm able to do that by myself, again, people will start noticing that, but then now you're able to go out there, and that's where your social awareness comes in. We work on developing that in the team environment. But then again, it's the relationship management. And everything always is going to come back down to the communication, working through conflict, the relationship management. And I think that's how you really, are able to kind of see those parallels between sport and the business world, because the best coaches and leaders in either one have that ability to bring out the best in themselves and others and call them to a higher level.
Right. Well, I guess that's sort of the scary thing, as it were. You know what I mean? Because then that kind of cycles back to how do you have those honest conversations? So I guess tell me about one of the times when you first felt like your visions of things and your ability to help others was clicking and this was working, when your mentoring you could see was getting to the other side.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you start to see that, like, first off, when I was teaching, is like the people who are disengaged, you can tell pretty quickly who that is by looking around or whatever, but like the eye contact, just like that engagement of someone like sitting back and looking. And then I'm a big words of affirmation guy, but the notes that people would give me, or a letter that someone would write, or a student might write me a note and say, thank you. And then maybe getting some of that from parents of like, hey, you really helped my kid. I can see the growth. And then like those words of encouragement that also come from your peers. That kind of helped, okay, what I'm doing is working, or it's hitting, it's reaching some people and it's making a difference. And that is like the fulfillment that comes from coaching and teaching, whether that's adults or whether that's young people, is when you genuinely get someone that thanks you for something that you've done that helps them out. Those are life-giving words. It's part of one of the teachings that we do on, the culture building, but like, the role that you play on a team where you might not be the leader per se, but you can lead the leader. And one of the simple ways is just 2 words, is thank you. And I always tell like the adults that I work with is a lot of times I've heard people refer to it as a crap folder. And it might be like a little crap folder in their inbox or something in their desk.
Yeah.
And
it's the evolution of the junk drawer.
Yeah, exactly. But when you're having a bad day, you pull that up, or you open that, or you find a note, or you find a card from somebody. And I share the story now that a few years ago I was working with a construction group out in Denver, and it was a room full of like 20, 25 young field engineers. And they brought me in because they wanted to invest in these people's growth early on when they're tenure with the company, because they want them to stay. So we're going through this exercise, and at the end of it, putting on the board things that you can do that can help uplift and lead the leader and be supportive. And one of the executives in the back that brought him in, and he's like, Kyle, can we stop for a second? And I'm like, hey, you're paying for this. You do whatever you want, man. Whatever.
They're your brakes. Push them.
Yeah, push them, man. And he's like, I'm not saying this to be a martyr, but I just want all of you to look at the first 2 words up there, thank you. And he's like, I've been in this industry for 30, 35 years, something like that. And I can count on my hand how many times that someone has genuinely thanked me for something that I've done or told me that I did a good job.
Right.
And he said, like, those are the days when I didn't feel like showing up. I didn't feel like I was valued, or that anything I did actually mattered. I remembered those people and those conversations, and that got me through those days. And his point was, like, you never know what people are going through. And I think the other side of like the leadership part is it takes a lot to lead people, and those leaders need to be encouraged and led as well. And, for me, what clicked or what helped just give me that spark were those words of encouragement.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Well, then I'm gonna ask you one kind of loaded one, and then maybe we can get you out of here on something kind of easy. I like to discuss motivation with people. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on motivation.
In what way? Are people naturally motivated, or?
I guess to not be too much cards on the table here, I'm not the hugest fan of motivation. I don't really think it's a real thing. I don't think it's worth the powder to blow it to hell. And at the end of the day, self-discipline is really what we're after. So when there are people like yourself who have worked with people that are growing and progressing, at some point along the way, it gets to be a real easy excuse. I wasn't motivated. Today it wasn't this. Today I didn't.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't care much for motivation, because she's a fickle dancer. So
That's a great point.
I'm wondering how you feel about motivation and how you try to sell it or cautiously present it to people you're trying to help grow.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think I don't know if it was Jim Rome or someone like that, but one of their famous quotes, I don't know if you've ever heard it before, is like, he's like, motivation is like deodorant. Like you have to apply it all the time. And I like how you relayed that to discipline. So motivation is fleeting. And if you're going to be successful, whether it's in sports or if it's in the professional setting, if you need someone that's going to come in and give a rah-rah speech to get you motivated and to get you ready to perform, you're going to fall flat.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. So I think that's where, again, you have to have like a holistic approach to it. So I don't view like what I'm doing, I wouldn't bill myself as a motivational speaker. Like, can I give a rah-rah talk or get people fired up? Sure. But I think it's more along the lines of like, helping give the parameters of what that might look like. Again, to be self-aware and self-disciplined, to have that management.
This is empowerment.
Right. It's more empowerment than in motivation. I'm glad you used that word, because that's where, again, people, you have to allow that. Like from a parent perspective, if I'm going to try to raise two young men that are going to be disciplined, I have to not do things for them. It's kind of like we've been talking about coaching and all of that, but part of it is being willing to see what's happening, allow a mistake to happen, but then be there to guide them and correct it.
Powerful.
And to show them what's right. And sometimes you don't have to always learn from people who've done the right. Some of your best learning is going to come from what not to do, not always what to do. And being able to give both examples, I think, is really important to people. But I'm with you on that. I think discipline, that's the thing that's the separator. And in a way, I think if you are disciplined, then you are motivated. You're motivated to be great. And that's the challenge that I give kids a lot in Echo in the professional work is, if your name's attached to something, and I'm just from knowing you from a little bit, I'm sure this is kind of like within your ethos, is like, if your name is attached to it, you want it to be the best it can possibly be.
Amen.
And if you don't want it to be the best it can possibly be, there's not much that I or anyone else can do for you.
Right.
But now if you do, and you see that I think has to be nurtured. Some people, even in my own family, on both sides, I see that they lack self-discipline. And I don't know where the gap was. I have theories.
Well, it's a scary thing.
It's a fine line, but you have to, again, I think it goes back to celebrating the success of when they do it, but you also have to be willing to let people go at it alone, not hold their hand and fail. And then you're there to help them out. And sometimes to that person, they might not understand it in the moment, but then later on they see that. And I think that's the ultimate thing about a leader is you're constantly planting seeds and you're constantly watering. You might not ever see that, maybe in your lifetime or the time that you're working with them, but that return or that fruit is going to come back 10, 15 years down the road. But yeah, motivation is fleeting. It's kind of that paradox of it's a soundbite, but I think when you look at it, people who are self-disciplined, they're motivated to be their best. And those are the people that you win with, and those are the ones that I think are the lifelong learners that,
right.
They have the ability to continuously improve year after year.
Right. Yeah. Good point. I got one more loaded form for you, then a fun one.
I'm enjoying it. Keep it going.
How do you help people from making excuses along the way? Because it seems to be a lot of what you just described. The pitfalls on that journey are always excuse making. It always sounds best to the person saying it. You know what I mean? How do you keep people honest with themselves and not to say things like, oh man, it's cold outside, I'm not going for a run today, or oh man, I don't want to read today, or whatever the case may be. How do you help people stay aligned with their goals?
Yeah. I think one of the things I use often is like, you have freedom of choice, but not of consequence. So, okay, great.
That's a poster.
Like, bed's warm today, nice and comfy. You don't want to do it, great. You don't have to do it, but like, you can't complain then when you don't get the result. So, that's one of the teaching points is like, you're free to make the choice, but you've got to be disciplined in your choice if you want that. And the other part is one of the equations that we'll use a lot is I'm sure people have heard it different ways. It's either E plus P equals O or E plus R equals O. So the O is the outcome, right? The E is the event, and then the P or the R is your perspective or your response. And so for that, I think it's really important to get people to understand, like, you can only control your attitude, your effort, and your emotional response to that. You can't control other people's feelings. You can't control other people's opinions. You can't control outside events. And that's the majority of it. That's 90% of what happens is on the outside. And people spend too much time worrying about things that they cannot control instead of focusing on that 10%, which is your response or your perspective. But that 10% ultimately determines the outcome.
And once that perspective is out of balance, your actions are much harder to regulate.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's, again, constant conversations and keeping that in mind. That's the thing, again, kind of to that point I made earlier about that Solil Bloom quote is, we all need to be reminded of the things that we already know. I need to be reminded of the things. And I think that's one of the great things for me personally is being a coach and being a teacher and being someone that facilitates, workshops, is through those teachings, I'm reminded of what I need to do, of how I need to live, and trying to keep myself in alignment with that. So that then becomes, the constant conversation that you have with the people you're working with is, okay, last quarter was great. We can't just rely on that. Like, okay, last game we won, that's great. We got to move on to the next thing and keep getting better, keep evolving, keep moving. And that comes from focusing only on the things that you can control.
You're right. Amen to that. I'm a stoic philosopher kind of guy, so I like the sound of that one. But you said one more thing. When you're speaking to other people and you can use their reactions or whatever as a reflection to remind yourself of things, how do you stay conscious of allowing that to happen when you're literally in the situation where you're supposed to be doing that for them?
You mean, how do I interpret their feedback in that moment?
No, how do you stay open-minded to the two-way street of letting your audience be your mirror instead of you just for them?
Yeah, no, okay, great. I love that question. Because not every group is the same. So when I'm preparing to go and work with a group, there's an outline of like what we're going to cover and what we're going to do. But based upon like the energy or the response or the eye engagement, or if you ask for examples or for people to share things early on, then you can shift a little bit and go. And so it was funny, we were out in San Diego this past week for a workshop. It was through a company that my wife works for. She asked me, like, have you prepared? Have you gone through everything? I was like, yes, I know what we're going to be talking about. I know what we're going through, but I don't memorize things because I want it to be real in the moment. And there's certain stories or anecdotes that I'll share with one group that come to mind that I don't share with another group. And I think that's where I'm constantly trying to be open-minded and curious of learning what engages other people. Or being able to have a story that's not my story, but I can say, hey, I met this person. They were so cool. I met him in Sarasota. I was on his podcast, learned about some of the music. He told me, I never been to the Sphere before, but he told me about the way that audio hits out there. And like, I think that's the part of always, again, trying to be interested in others and not be the interesting person. That just gets stored in like the back of your mind. And so then when you're in a conversation with someone, or you're working with someone, you start asking questions to figure out what might hit or resonate with them. Well, now I've got a whole mental Rolodex that I can pull from and be more present in the moment that can share a story with them that relates to them, not me trying to make them relate to what I'm saying, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. This is one of the maybe the innate Rolodex of basic human interaction.
It's a skill, but I mean, that's one of the things that our young people that coming out of the COVID era that they don't have.
Right. And that's part of the reason why I was curious about that, because for some people that whole scenario seems foreign.
Oh, completely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so like there's little exercises that we'll do and like things that you can do to help them learn the art of just being curious, asking a question and learning how to take that from there. But that's really helped me. It's just like that's the thing I rely on is those conversations, those experiences, because then, like I said earlier, we're all, I think, after the same things in life. We all want to be fulfilled. We all want to be valued. We all want to have and be loved and to give that and receive that and just have that happiness. And so when that becomes, your lens or your perspective, then it makes it, easier to connect and relate with people.
Yes, and that's ultimately where the power is at.
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing that, because that's a huge part of the ethos of Keep the Hotel Empty. So that's powerful right
like
there.
Anything what we say in teaching or coaching is no one cares what you have to say unless they know that you care. And the only way that they
I
know
like that one.
The only way they know that you care is you being genuinely interested in them. And that means talking less about yourself. Who cares? Like they'll ask more about that later on, but that's, I think, the thing that young people that we got to tell, like we try to teach our own kids is like, just ask questions, be interested in what they have to say, and you'll be able to form a connection from it.
And you never know what you're going to hear.
Never. That's the great part about it. You get some good stories.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so here's your fun one. I've been asking this question of people recently. I was going to retire the question, but I think that you're an ultra appropriate one to ask for it, so we're retiring this question with you.
I'm the last one?
You're the last one that's getting this question.
Some pressure.
Yeah, I've got kind of a Rolodex of fun questions. This is one that cropped out of nowhere, but I don't want it to get too played out, so you're the last one. If I gave you 10,000 billboards across the United States right now, you can put one phrase. I don't care if it's a website. I don't care what it is. One thing on 10,000 billboards across the United States right now, what do you put on it?
Can it be like 3 that we just rotate, or has it got to be 1?
It's got to be 1. One person answered the question by using a web address that then had all the information they wanted.
That's good. That's
I have been circumnavigated on this one before, so you can color outside the lines.
Well, the answer I give goes to, and the reason why I'm choosing this one over a bunch of other ones and I might have used some of the other ones that we shared, but for me, what I do and why I do what I do is all about helping people. And so the one that I would put there, especially for young people who I'm passionate about working with, is believe in yourself and your future results. Love it. So, and then that would tie into other things like a secondary one would be forget the how. That would be my other one.
Fair enough. We'll put it in parentheses like a book title.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Kyle, I can't thank you enough for coming down. I'm so grateful that you came down, shared some time with us, shared some of your insight, and we'd love to have you back. Anytime you got anything going in your world, you are always welcome here, my friend.
Yeah, I'd love to do it again. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle.
My pleasure.
Yeah.